Hello, and welcome to tonight's episode of JRocks Pop Culture Revolution. I am your pop culture host, Jason J. Rock Houston, and tonight you are watching episode number 34. And what's going to be on is a real fun classic Walt Disney film. It's going to be on this Pinocchio. Man, that was one of my all-time favorite um, films growing up as a child. Now, of course, Pinocchio came out years before I was even born, but we'll get into that. So what I wanted to let you guys know at the top of the show, though, is initially going into tonight's episode, I thought that this was just going to be a standard one-part episode, like most of our episodes are. There's been a few where we had to make them, two-part episodes, but and it looks like this is going to be another one of those episodes because by the end of tonight's episode, we're going to just barely even get into really talking about Pinocchio. And it's because this film and the success of it and how it did at the box office had a lot to do with, history and specifically World War II. And that had a major effect on how this film did at the box office. And so that's kind of what we're going to be talking mostly in part one. And then part two is going to really be getting into the film itself. So that's why, because if we just did this episode, just made it just a one-parter, we really would not be telling the whole Pinocchio story. So we want you to get the whole story. So that's why this is going to be a two-parter. Now let's get into this, okay? Hello and welcome. I am your host, Jason J. Rock Houston, and you are watching, JRocks Pop Culture Revolution. And this is the pop culture show where we turn up the volume on pop culture. So if you're a pop culture fan, you're at the right place then. So you're going to love to hear all about Pinocchio tonight. So let's get into it. I was able to find out a few interesting facts regarding Walt Disney's classic animated film of Pinocchio. And of course, as I said, the film came out. It was originally released on February 7th, 1940. And we should note that Pinocchio was Walt Disney's second full-length animated film, following the success of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which came out just a few years prior. And so when they went in and did Snow White, which I think we're going to have to do an episode on eventually, but when they did Snow White, it was really a learning process on how to make films, especially an animated movie for Walt Disney and the Disney Company. And so by the time it came time to do Pinocchio, they had really learned on Snow White how to make an animated film. And so they used a lot of what they learned in making Snow White when they went to create the Pinocchio movie. So let's get into some more of these fun facts that I was able to learn. Now, Pinocchio, as I said, was released during World War II era, coming out in 1940. And that's why originally when the film came out in 1940, it was not financially successful at the box office originally. And because again, what Walt Disney and the Disney Company found out when they put out the Snow White film was that in order for a film to be successful, it depended on profits from the European countries and other foreign markets. And so by the time Pinocchio had premiered in 1940, Germany had already invaded Poland in September of 1939. Britain and France were already at war with Germany. And this is kind of what I wasn't really aware of. And this is kind of an interesting fact that we're going to talk a lot about tonight that is a reason why we got to break this up into a two-part episode. It said many European countries face censorship, financial hardship, and closed movie theaters. Now let's talk a little bit about that. So if you're the Walt Disney Company and you got to think that like Disney or any studio, they don't just make money from releasing the film in the U.S. alone. I mean, typically what they do is films like this get released all over the world, and so when you're able to release a major motion picture like this, not just in your own country but all around the world, the profit margin is just really great because people are are seeing the movie all around the world. And we don't think about stuff like this, but let's kind of go back in a time machine tonight and kind of think what the world was like in the 1940s when World War II was going on. I mean, it didn't affect us horribly too much here in the U.S. like it did in the European countries. And what I'm talking about is in doing the research for tonight's episode, I was able to learn that, for example, when Pinocchio came out in 1940, many of the European countries did not get the film. Part of it that is, like for example, Disney and the other film studios, they were unable to, ship their films, to the other countries, internationally, and there had been censorship as far as certain countries not allowing like American films to be seen in their um, countries and stuff like that going on. Okay, now on top of it, during World War II, we got to think of a lot of people, especially living in the European countries, their life is their life was drastically different even than what people were going through in the U.S. because in many of those European countries they were war torn and the war was going on. So a lot of those people during World War II time, they're struggling financially. Some of them are going off to war and fighting in World War II. Some people came back alive, some did not come back home. They died on the battlefield in the war. And so World War II had all kinds of effects. And it's kind of funny to sit here and think about the effect the war had on not just a movie like Pinocchio, but any major motion picture that came out in 1940. I mean, and so what happened is, for example, by 1945, I was able to learn that after the war had ended, many what it said was in the United States, like I guess too during the 1940s, when Pinocchio came out and World War II was going on, for example, a lot of people were staying home. Pinocchio was very much being shown in the United States in movie theaters, but let's think about it for a minute. Um, Maybe many people in the United States at that time, all around the world, were struggling financially. So many people, for example, might have wanted to go to a movie theater and see Pinocchio, but maybe they were financially struggling. Maybe they weren't working or they didn't have as much income coming in, and they had to support their family, had to go and buy food for their family. And so you think, when maybe it comes to a situation, well, if I go see a movie tonight, if I go watch Pinocchio at the movie theater, we're not going to have money to go to the grocery stores and buy food and the groceries and the supplies and the things we need to support our family. So people were making decisions like that. And then also, like I was saying, during World War II, a lot of European countries were unable during those years to go to a movie theater because, again, many of the films like from the U.S. were not being sent to the European countries for various reasons. Um, a lot of stuff going on that affected, and so without a movie like Pinocchio or any major blockbuster films going over to the European countries, the film studios were losing out on a lot of money that they would normally get. Now here's the interesting thing. Around 1945, it said, people in the U.S. really kind of started going back to the movies a lot faster than some of the other European countries, and the reason for that was that many of the movie, not just the movie theaters, but because World War II was taking place in many of the European countries. Um, many things were destroyed throughout Europe. You know, movie theaters. I mean, every type of business. People's houses where they lived, towns were destroyed, and so again, pretty much today in 2026, there's not a town where you can't find a movie theater to go to. I just went to the movies today, and I enjoyed myself, but and it's something I still enjoy doing. And what's it's kind of interesting because I had a discussion with a coworker of mine, and him and I always talk as he enjoys going to the movies, but like a lot of people his age, because I'm in my 50s and he's in his mid 20s, and he tells me, Jason, I used to love to go to movies like you, but I just stay home now and I watch everything on streaming. And that's people are allowed to do what they want to do, but I still have a ton of fun going out to the theater. It is an experience to me. It's just nothing like watching a movie on the big screen. And I think a lot of people have had that experience. And it's hard to even imagine not having a movie theater to go to. I mean, I think the closest that um, that we can, people my generation or anyone really came to experience that was during COVID when they closed everything down. You weren't allowed to go to the movies. Nothing was being seen, and also during COVID, it kind of helped you kind of think like what it must have been like during World War II, especially for these European war-torn countries. Um, I remember just having the desire to go see a movie theater. Thank God I have, you know, I have my like DVD collection, stuff like this that I could at least pull out and watch at home. But again, I was missing out on the experience of going to the movie theater. And I can't tell you how much I enjoyed once the theaters opened up and people were allowed to go back in. I mean, it became a situation where some of the local politicians were threatening to, well, we're going to make it so there's going to be never no more live concerts as long as I'm in office, and no more going to crowded events like that. Thank God it did not come to that. I can even imagine not having the option to go see a movie at a movie theater, but because of what they did during COVID, and people have their various opinions on that, and we don't want to get political here, but I will say I think people should be able to make their choice, have choices. Like, okay, if somebody has a fear of going out in crowds or they don't want to go out in public, that's their choice. But don't ruin it for the ones that enjoy having that experience of going and watching something on the big screen. And so you can imagine both in the United States and in these European war-torn countries, the effect something like that would have of not being able to go to the movies. I can imagine, I can only imagine because I wasn't there in the 1940s, just based on stuff I learned growing up about history. Um, that could you imagine not being able to go to a movie theater because there wasn't a single movie theater in your town, or that all the movie theaters had been destroyed, you know, during the wartime, or they had very little um, films maybe to show, and so probably they ran out of stuff to show. But so during the war, people aren't getting to enjoy these things that they typically get to enjoy, or they have to make choices of, well, do I go to a movie theater and have some fun, or do I go buy groceries for the family? These are the types of decisions that were having to be made. And then the interesting thing is, once World War II came to an end, it said, in the United States, movie going picked up, almost right away because people missed going to it so much. But it was a real, it was a real treat for the European countries once, the war ended, and it took almost to 1945 till those countries were able to get out to a movie theater and go watch a movie. And you can imagine living in a war-torn country, and first of all, going to the movies might not even be the first thing that's on your mind, but you might think about, oh, oh, look around the town. This is a neighborhood. Everything's been destroyed from the, our country's been destroyed from what took place during the war. Now people need to work on rebuilding it, getting back to work. And then think about the people with fought in the war. The soldiers, they come back home after the war, and then many of them have had injuries or had things that changed their life because they they fought in the war, and so a lot of stuff like that was going on. And then can you imagine coming home from a war, having to start your life all over, and then people just kind of doing everything to start their life over, trying to get a job. So you can imagine they were able to, when the theaters throughout Europe had been destroyed, rebuilt, people were able to go back and see a movie. You can imagine what a great, fun time that was. I mean, even if you go back and look in history, folks, about you know, like even before TV, they had radio. That was kind of the first kind of form of media. People would get together, listen to music on their radio. They'd listen to the news. They'd listen to different things on the radio. Um, and so that's another kind of fun thing to kind of look back on how all this history had effect on everything. Um, and so again, as I was saying, as World War II expanded, Disney lost a lot of money because many of their films could not were not allowed to be seen throughout Europe. Many of the films were not able to send them there. So basically, what ended up happening is by 1945, Disney re-released many of their classic films, such as Pinocchio, Bambi, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, in Europe, and when because many of those people in those European war-torn countries had never gotten the chance to see those films when they were originally released a few years prior. So now these people throughout Europe are finally getting a chance to see these classic Disney films, and I mean, you can imagine once that happened, not only do these people enjoy watching these classic Disney films finally getting the chance of seeing these films that they had heard all about, but Disney starts having all that money that they lost during this time, start to come in, and the films then become very successful at the box office, not just in the U.S. but all around the world. It's just kind of amazing, and of course, it says in the European countries following the end of World War II, movie going did not rebound as quickly as it did in the U.S. And we've kind of gone over some of that tonight. And like I said, because believe it or not, because theaters and cities had been damaged and destroyed during the war. Okay, another thing you don't think about. If anybody's ever traveled to Europe or any other countries, transportation is very different. I mean, for example, in Europe, a lot of people get around by taxi, trains, buses, um, cabs, cars. But even throughout Europe, people drive on different sides of the road than we do here in the U.S. That's just how it is over there in Europe. But you don't really think about how transportation might affect somebody going to the movies, but it does. Let's think about it. I mean, just today, I went to the movies. I hop in my car. I went. I'm gonna go see a movie. I find out what time the movie starts. I hop in the car. Takes me because there's a movie theater literally right down the street from where I live. It's like 5 minutes down the street. So I could have walked, but I got in the car and I drove down there. And see, that's the thing. Transportation, as far affects many people going to see a movie. You don't really think about it, but okay, if I hadn't had a car, maybe I would have to have somebody give me a ride. Uh, I could have walked down there, but what is like 5 minutes away from my house in the car, walking it might take me 10 or 20 minutes to get down there. another 10 or 20 minutes to walk back to my house. It's a pretty straight shoot. I could do it if I had to. Other people want to go to a movie, they might not have a movie theater so close. They might have to hop on a train or hop on their bike or the bus or something, or take a cab. And then, just think about that. If somebody, has a movie theater in their town, but it's to the point they got to get in a cab. They don't drive themselves. Okay, so now you got to have not just money to go to the movies and maybe some snacks and stuff, but then you got to have bus fare or cab fare, and that's at least going to be another 10 20 dollars depending on how far you live from the movie theater. The movies is really kind of turned into a big business that we really didn't think about. When you go to movies, most people like to have a big tub of popcorn. Most people have to have a big soda. I don't really drink soda myself, so that's not really an issue. I go to movies. I typically, I'll be honest, I sneak stuff in because I don't want to pay $10 for a popcorn. I don't need to eat that much popcorn, either. So there's that. Okay, and then like I say, by 1945, Disney was able to release many of their films that had never been seen in Europe, and so they started to make money off these films that were being seen on the European movie theaters for the very first time. And we should also note that in regards to Pinocchio, Walt Disney's classic 1940 movie, which is supposed to be the main topic of tonight's conversation, was based on a story from 1826, The Adventures of Pinocchio, written by Italian writer Carlo Collodi, who died on October 26, 1890, years before the story was ever made into a Walt Disney picture. And that's important, folks, because Pinocchio finally became a movie. Many most movies are based on like other people's stories or books or novels. And so this guy, his story, Pinocchio, that comes out, it dates all the way back. I mean, can you imagine a movie, an animated movie, comes out in 1940 on this story from the late 1800s? So of course, by the time it's turned into a movie, the original writer and creator of Pinocchio, he is since passed on. He didn't get to live to see his story turned into a movie and turned into a classic animated film. So that's another very important thing to know tonight. And so before wrapping up tonight's episode, we got to just tell you a few exciting things, okay? So once Walt Disney started working on the film Pinocchio, he felt that the movie had followed Carlo Collodio's Pinocchio a little too close. And the problem with that was that the original character of Pinocchio was very dark and rude and crude. And Walt Disney, of course, Disney being a family-friendly kind of company, Walt Disney started to worry that, wait a minute, if we go ahead making this Pinocchio movie, it's an animated cartoon, it's supposed to be family, a family film. Pinocchio in its current state, he's rude, he's crude, he's very dark. He had the fear that people are going to go watch the movie and not have any love or even like Pinocchio. So he told his writers and his artists, okay, I want you guys to go back and you recreate the character of Pinocchio. We want this to be a family-friendly film. We want the audience to watch the film and fall in love with Pinocchio. And part of that was he demanded that the artist make Pinocchio look more childlike. He didn't want it to look so much like a puppet, even though, of course, the whole concept of Pinocchio is, a wooden puppet that turns into a real boy. But he thought it was more important to make Pinocchio look more like a real child. And so they started the production of Pinocchio, but once Walt Disney made these decisions, he said, okay, we got to scrap what we've done and start all the way over from scratch. And that is exactly what they did. Um, now I'd like to thank you for checking out episode number 34 of JRocks Pop Culture Revolution on Pinocchio. Now, as I said at the top of the episode today, this was originally supposed to be just a one-part episode, but as you can see, um, we talked so much about what was going on during World War II, and we had to because of the effect that had on the success of Pinocchio at the box office. And so it would not be fair to just kind of end the episode here because you're probably thinking like, hey, you haven't really even gotten into Pinocchio really and talked all about it like you usually do. And that's why, like I said, if we were in the episode here, just telling part of the story. We on this show, we like to tell the complete story. So sometimes we have to do two-part episode. It's worth you guys tuning into next week to get the complete story. And that's why I want to thank everybody for watching our show because it's very important to let you know that that is the very reason why JRocks Pop Culture Revolution is the loudest voice on the internet in regards to pop culture because we tell you the whole entire story. I am Jason J. Rock Houston, and I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. Like I said, we just scratched the surface. So tune in for part 2 of our episode next week, where we will really get into the story of Pinocchio. And it's going to be a fun one. You're gonna enjoy it. Okay, we're going to get into the characters, Pinocchio himself, and the behind the scenes stories that you want to hear. This is the show for that. Thanks for tuning in, guys. See you again real soon. Bye for now.